reasons. So this was 2016, and at that time I was able to transition into a more kind of analytics-based data science role because I didn't know so much machine learning back then. I knew more statistics. And then just on the job, I've learned a lot of the skills that you need to know. So I learned how to program properly on the job. I learned how to do machine learning. I learned how to do natural language processing on the job. Obviously, you need to put in some time outside work sometimes, but I certainly didn't come into data science knowing everything. And I certainly didn't come into data science knowing everything I know now. So I guess also probably the thing to say as well is data science is a really big field, and I tend to think of it as broken down into three main fields, sort of more classic machine learning and analytics, natural language processing, and computer vision. So natural language processing is sort of the area everyone's talking about right now, but in fact, it's a subspecialization. So, you know, if you don't like LLMs and you don't care about them, there's still plenty of work to do in data science that has nothing to do with it. If you do like it, not everything in NLP is LLMs either. So yeah, that's just sort of, I guess, my background and a bit of words of encouragement.
Okay, thank you so much, Jodie, for that great one. I want to believe we all are here, not just but we are just here for the community, the Python community, the data science community. And I would love to ask you, can you share some key lessons you've learned throughout your journey in data science?
Yeah, so do you mean more sort of technical lessons or more life lessons maybe? Or do you want to hear both?
Technical lessons first before the live lessons. Thank you.
Sure. So I think probably one of the technical lessons I learned is, so when you first start in tech, like in a tech job, you will feel very overwhelmed. Everyone goes through this phase because the field is absolutely enormous. And part of the complication we have as data scientists is data science is still not really one job, and it overlaps quite heavily with a bunch of other jobs. So I kind of think of data science as sitting between analytics, like business analytics that people use for reporting, and engineering, which is more about building software. And some companies, you know, there will be a very kind of, you know, heavy overlap between them, especially smaller companies. This is okay, it can be okay. But really the core of a data scientist job is being a researcher. Like it's in the name, like we are scientists. So the idea is you would get hired ideally by a company in order to do some sort of innovation. It might be improving internal processes, it might be creating intellectual property for the company, but generally this is the core of what a data scientist does. So what it means is you don't necessarily need to be a super great programmer depending on where you end up working, because all of my career, I've chosen to work in medium-sized companies. And this was a deliberate choice for me because I didn't want to work in startups. There's nothing wrong with startups, it's just not what I wanted. And in these medium-sized companies, you will have basically engineers that you will work with. So the relationship between the data scientist and the engineer is the engineer will basically take what the data scientist has prototyped and make it production ready. And this involves a bunch of things that we don't necessarily need to know as data scientists, like how to make code that is tested, how to make code that is really performant, how to make code that is easy to debug and stable. Like we don't necessarily need to be super great programmers. We just need to know how to use code as a research tool. So that was sort of one lesson I learned along the way. Oh, sorry, I think there's got a bit of echo. Yeah, thank you. That was one lesson I learned on the way. And I think probably another important lesson is, I kind of alluded to it, but you don't need to learn everything. So just think about what you're actually interested in and try and focus on one thing to start with and try and get a job doing roughly that thing. And then it's a long career. As your career evolves, you will find other things that you're interested in and you'll pick up that knowledge as you need to. So I think that's my very long answer to that question.
Oh, that was a very detailed answer. Thank you so much, Judith. We really appreciate that answer. So, basically, you're saying that you don't have to know the whole thing, because I know data science is broad and you just have to focus on a niche, build yourself, and then you learn on the job. Thank you so much, Jodie. Thank you. Okay, so I would be asking one other question before the floor opens to other participants to ask their questions as well. Um, in your experience, what skills do you think are crucial for successful or being a successful data scientist?
This is a super nice question because not all of these skills are hard skills. So I would say you need to have a tolerance for ambiguity. And if you're going through a data science career or some sort of career that involves data science units, you would have already experienced this with your projects. Working with data means that you don't necessarily have all the answers up front because it's a research process. And being comfortable with needing to kind of be like, okay, I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like I have enough evidence and I feel comfortable in this to stand by what I'm, going to present to the business. You need to have this mindset, like this researcher mindset. I think obviously you need to be curious, but I think that is essential really for any career where you have constant learning. So I think that's a given. I don't think you need to live and breathe this. Like I live in Germany now, and Germany has really strong laws about work and life. And I think that's a good thing. Like I try and learn what I can on the job. I can't keep up with everything. So I have to use my time wisely. And what else? Yes. So really core part of being a data scientist is being able to communicate to the business. So I always kind of think of the job of a data scientist is you have business stakeholders come to you. Maybe they come from marketing, maybe they come from product, maybe they come from sales, and they have this idea that something in the business could be improved. They've observed it, and so they have this intuition based on their experience. But they need to know if they're right, or they need to understand, can we build something to automate this? So your job is to take their idea and to translate into something that can be tested or encapsulated using statistics or data or machine learning. It doesn't always need to be machine learning. Sometimes it's just graphs. And then you need to be able to communicate that back to the business. And you need to be able to communicate very well as a data scientist, because you're going to be taking stuff that is super complex sometimes. And you need to work out how much of that information you need to convey to the business so that they trust you. But also they're not like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, I just wanted to know whether my intuition about this was right or something like that. So the communication stuff is a super important skill, and it's often overlooked in favor of you need to know all these advanced algorithms. No, the communication is always going to be more important.
Okay, thank you, Jodie. I've learned that soft skills is very important
Yeah.
as a data scientist. Thank you so much. So the session is open for every other attendees to ask their questions. If you have any questions you would like to throw open to Jodie, please feel free to do that. Thank you.
And like I said, please do not be shy. There is probably a question I've asked myself if you're thinking of asking it.
Okay, thank you very much, Olukemi Jacobs. Thank you for picking up this task. We've been working together, and you've shown that you are capable. Don't worry, there's still more work to work together with Jodie on Humble Data, and you will find it more interesting. So someone is raising up his hand. I would like to give the floor to the person, and we also have a question on the chat section. So let's give it up to Okereke Emmanuel. Can you please unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, good morning, Mark. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, sir, I just wanted to ask a short question to you, ma'am. And for we that are new to this aspect of tech, we just needed a clear or something short. So we just wanted to know the difference between data analysis and data science. Yes, ma'am.
This is such a good question. So the short answer is that there's not always a clear distinction. So you might have noticed if you're looking around at job applications, sometimes you'll see a role that's just called data analyst or junior data analyst. And those roles they seem to have a lot of data science in them. So part of this is a misunderstanding by employers about what the distinction between these two are. The kind of clearest distinction is between business intelligence analysts and data scientists. So business intelligence analysts are people that you would hire to just try and monitor the day-to-day of what's going on in the business. Like, do our financials look okay? Are we getting in the stock that we expected? Are we getting through enough customer queries a day? So they're not necessarily working on new unknown research projects, but they are working with data in order to present more things that are already known about the business and need to be monitored. Pure data scientists, as I said, they will work on research and innovation. And then there's this big gray area of data analysts. And especially in a smaller company, your data scientist or your data analyst or whatever the title is that they end up giving you, might be doing business intelligence analysts and some innovation work. So it's not entirely clear in the industry. And I would say when you're first starting, my first job title was not actually data scientist, and then they changed it. Try and focus on whether you think the job will be a good fit for you, rather than, because I really just thought I had to get a data science job, and I couldn't when I first started. But I got a data analytics job and I did a lot of data science. So in the end, it was fine. So just look at what the job criteria actually are and see whether you think it'll be a good fit for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jodie. I can see you are giving it a point. And also, I would like to welcome one of our staff, the admission officer, the senior academic registrar for McPherson University, for finding time to join this meeting and to also ask for quest for knowledge. Mr. Isaac Merayebu, you are welcome on board. Thank you. I recognize you. You can unmute to greet Jodie if you feel free.
Jodie, good morning. Thank you,
Good
Doc.
morning.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I have a question by Diola on the chat for you, Jodie. Number one question, which I want you to answer first before I go to number two. What are the possibilities of getting a job as a data scientist, especially with the way the data world is quite saturated at the moment? Should I repeat the question?
No. That was perfectly clear. My face was, yeah, I know the job market is hard right now. So I don't know what the job market is like in Nigeria, so I can only speak for what I'm seeing in Germany, say. So please, take my advice with a grain of salt. The job market is harder now than it was when I started. So it is more competitive. But what I would say is, in terms of what people are still looking for in juniors, is they're looking for someone who really understands how to work with data and do that complete kind of storytelling. So you can take the requirements from a business stakeholder and translate them. Now, if you haven't had a job, obviously you don't know if you can do this, but you will sort of know you can do this from the way that you've worked with projects in the past. So you will have had to take some sort of research question and translate it into a report or something. These are the exact same skills. So good companies will understand that juniors need mentoring, but the raw kind of skills that most of them are looking for is not actually like, and I get this question a lot from people who are just about to graduate. Do I need to know this algorithm and this algorithm and this algorithm in the interview? Some workplaces will give you interviews like that. Sometimes they can feel really bad. Sometimes I still get interviews like that, and it feels terrible when you don't know the exact thing they're asking you about. I don't think that they're good places to work, if I'm being perfectly honest, if you have an interview like that. A good interview for a junior data scientist will focus on your potential to be able to do that translation between a business question and a data question and then communicate it back. So emphasizing that, emphasizing a willingness to learn, emphasizing that you can sort of, with some guidance and mentorship, get off to a good start. I think that's a good way to sell yourself. And that's my
answer. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. The second question I have here is which of the new technologies should a data enthusiast learn because it's hard to keep up with all of them all?
This is also an amazing question, and I'm going to let you in on a secret. I had the exact same question 8 years ago when I was starting. Look, I think honestly, unless you are specifically interested in a role working on the cutting edge, focus more on fundamentals. So focus more on making sure you can do visualizations properly. I know it sounds super basic, but this is something you'll be using a lot. Make sure that whatever programming language you're working in, you're relatively comfortable in it. Make sure you know SQL. You don't need to be really good in these languages, but knowing SQL will always be helpful. And focus on your basic machine learning algorithms and basic machine learning theory, like, understanding data issues like feature leakage or overfitting, things like this, because these are things that will never go away. Now, I'm a little bit of an LLM skeptic. I spend a lot of time talking about LLMs, but I'm kind of skeptic about them. LLMs, okay, going back a step. One part of data science is creating algorithms, right? But another part of working as a data scientist is working with engineers to deploy whatever you've built. And the bigger and more complicated an algorithm is, the harder it is to deploy because you basically need to run those models. So LLMs are actually super expensive to run. They're quite difficult to productionize, and there's a lot of issues still with them. So not that many people are actually working with LLMs in production, even though you'll see a lot of startups that are looking for people right now. A lot of those are running on venture capital money, and I don't believe that a lot of those businesses will be in business in a year. There will always be work for core machine learning algorithms. And if you have an interest in NLP, maybe go down that path. But don't jump to the most advanced stuff. Also make sure that you know your NLP fundamentals, like binary vectorization and stuff. Like, you don't need to know all this. But if you're interested, you can look into it, and it's not too hard to learn.
Thank you very much. While we are trying to look forward to more questions, I have one of my community supporter here that is also supporting the Python beginner community. It's also working with Olukemi Jacobs. I have Mr. Mayowa Oguniran. Can you please unmute and say hi to Jodie and be prepared to also ask questions that will help the student, because I know you are serving presently and you have the vast knowledge in data science. Mr. Mayowa Oguniran, can you please unmute and say hi to Jodie? Okay, while waiting for him, anytime you are here, just let me know. Okay, Mr. Isaac Merayebu, can you please unmute and ask your question? Over to you. Your line is breaking.
Can you hear me, Jodie? Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Isaac. Yeah.
Why I joined is just because I'm really interested in data science, because most of the administrations, I think in the university system, are not really looking into the area of data science in enhancing their productivity and efficiency. And that's why I have to just ask this question this morning. So how can we ensure data privacy and security in administrative system, and what are the challenges and opportunity for data science in administration? Thank you.
Sure. So I'll do my best to answer this question, but I'll just sort of put the caveat around it that I've never specifically worked in this area. So some of my answers might be a little more general, if that's okay with you. So in terms of privacy, this is actually, it kind of goes down to the fundamentals that you would have with any data set that you would deal with as a data scientist, as a data analyst, as a data engineer. So anyone who touches data. One of the kind of fundamentals is if you are storing your data non-locally, as in you're working with a cloud provider like AWS or GCP or something like that, you need to make sure that your staff have training when they set up storage for the data to make sure it's not exposed publicly. So I worked, my first job actually as a data scientist, we worked with pretty sensitive data. We worked with job application data, which has things like addresses, dates of birth, things like that. And one of the engineering teams accidentally made one of the data storage areas public. And it was a huge problem. There was a woman who actually contacted us because her data was breached and she had a stalker. And basically she was super concerned that her stalker would now be able to get access to her new address and new phone number. So really, like, you need to make sure anyone who's touching that data has training about public exposure, especially if it's not kept locally. You need to make sure that anything that you do in terms of working with that data is done in aggregate. And you need to be very careful about small groups. So let's say you are dealing with a number of categories and you want to group your data by these categories. But some of these categories have really small subgroups. So it could be possible for someone to be individually identified in your reports just by the fact that they're part of a very rare combination. And then there's obviously also ethics, like don't use the data for things that are not likely to be helpful. Don't give people access to the data who don't need it, especially if it contains personally identifying information. Try and separate personal identifiers from other data and then just use an ID to connect two tables, because that it helps increase privacy. I think maybe that's it. And also just a kind of note about LLMs and data privacy. LLMs have serious problems when it comes to data privacy. So never, ever, ever let someone in your university or company use personal individual licenses with providers like OpenAI, for example, because those individual licenses will allow those providers to actually use that data for training. And if you've got personal identifying information, it's obviously hugely problematic. And another problem is these models can actually memorize data, and they can actually spit out wholesale things like addresses and names. So just be very careful when using LLMs with private data.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jodie. Thank you very much, Mr. Miraibu. Part of the question you asked are the resources, and at the end of this class or this webinar, we'll definitely introduce you to the Ombu Data workshop resources free of charge by Jodie and other partners for us to make use of. So I will get in touch with you with that. Before we go to the next question, Mr. Mayowa Oguniro is here with me, and I would like you to unmute and go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jodie.
Good morning.
We are so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And Dr. Kayode, thank you so much for helping us with this. We are very, very grateful. So, Jodie, I don't have a question really, but I'll just go straight to the point. Myself, I started out in data science with analytics. I have a background in metallurgical engineering and material science.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the application of machine learning in self-healing properties of materials for biotreatment in cancer patients. So I don't know what your advice would be for me, what to look out for and where my concentration should be. Thank you.
That is a super interesting background. So the first thing I want to say is having a domain expertise can actually be super useful. I'm sure you're probably already finding that. So early in my career, I felt a little bit like not having specialized in machine learning or statistics, because AI wasn't really and data science wasn't really a degree back then. But I used to kick myself for not specializing in, say, applied mathematics for my PhD. What I've actually found over time is it didn't really matter, and having domain expertise in an area actually helped my job prospects a lot. So while I've never worked specifically in a psychology job again, a lot of the data I work with is very similar, like it's behavioral data. So for you, I would say, firstly, figure out what you like. Like, it's also about what you like. You don't need to just do what people are telling you to do, what you think will impress people. But also see if you can leverage that domain knowledge, because it's super valuable when it comes to, maybe I'm talking to some engineers. I understand exactly what they're telling me because I have a background, and I can translate that into a data science question, have a conversation that is between specialists.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so
Thank you
much,
very
Jodie.
much, Jodie. Okay, to encourage Mr. Mayowa, I'm also working with someone on a project manufacturing tolerance for sheet metal bending using existing process capability data. It has been a tough one, but don't forget, because I'm a researcher, I need to delve into different fields using either data science or machine learning. So it's all about you. Now we move to another question. I have it asking about Jodie's thoughts on machine learning in data science, since artificial intelligence is taking over some of these things.
So, sorry, Dr. Kayode, you were breaking up a little bit. So I think you were reading the top question about what are her thoughts on the future of AI and machine learning. Was it that one?
Exactly. Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Perfect. So I also get this question a lot because I do a lot of conference talks on AI. I think this might have been what you were saying, Dr. Kayode. But basically, I don't think. Okay, I need to clarify my stance. I'm probably more of an AI skeptic than anything else, and this is also just my opinion. I'm not a researcher in this area, but there is increasing evidence that LLMs, at least, so let's just focus on them as the path that people are talking about when they talk about AI right now. They have serious limitations when it comes to reasoning, to working with symbolic logic, all of these sort of things that you need to have some sort of advanced problem solving. And the other kind of increasing evidence is that they're not generalists. They're very brittle when it comes to, say, different prompt templates that are used. There is actually, if you're interested, there's a fascinating paper that Apple just released, which was about the math reasoning in LLMs. Let me just find the title of that, because this paper it's not a difficult read. Math reasoning, LLMs, Apple. Yeah, perfect. So it's called GSM Symbolic. I can also send that link to Dr. Kayode after the seminar. But basically, what this shows is these models really can't do reasoning properly. So my sort of feeling is, yes, maybe some parts of the job will become easier. So I don't know if any of you have ever tried to use an LLM to say, generate pandas code or generate graph templates. Does that super well because it's been trained on huge amounts of this. But when it comes to the really hard part of our job, which is, again, translating business requirements into some sort of problem and then solving that problem, I don't think LLMs are ever going to take over that. Now, when it comes to other AI, I'm not an AI expert. I don't know. Maybe there are systems that will come and may be able to automate more advanced reasoning parts of our jobs, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. So please don't be scared that the field is going to disappear. I think software engineers' jobs are safe, and I think our jobs are even safer than software engineers because so much of our jobs is more ambiguous and more, it's not a harder job. I do not want to imply that, but it's even less of it can be automated.
Okay, thank you very much, Jodie, for that. I have another question from Joshua Adelakun. And before we go to that question, I met someone during the AI bootcamp, data science AI bootcamp, Mr. Patrick, and he gave me, while we were discussing, he told me how he started data science, and I was touched with his method that he used. And I told him to be part of this program so that he can share his wealth of experience with other participants. I don't know whether Mr. Patrick is online. If you're online, can you please unmute and say, talk to Jodie and have the opportunity to discuss with the whole house of how you delve into data science. Patrick, if you're online.
Hello. Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Dapo, for the chance or the opportunity. I'm very grateful. And Mrs. Jodie, it's a pleasure to meet you. So I'm grateful for being here and everything. So thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure to meet you as well. And look, if anyone else wants to jump in to answer questions as well, because we have quite a lot of very experienced people here, please, I talk a lot, so please feel free to also jump in and add your experience, because the more, I think, diversity of experience you have about these topics, the better.
Okay, thank you very much. So Patrick, I will give you a chance to talk now. Can you please go ahead and share your experience?
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I would not actually pretend like I'm probably very, like maybe I'm the best programmer or the best wherever there is. I'm basically still learning. And most people on earth are actually still learning. We are just going through the circles. We are all just trying to do what's right by ourselves and by each other. Now, when it comes to how I came into the field of computer or computer science, data science, and everything, I actually started out, I was just literally a boy. My brother had a chance to actually get into, my dad sent my brother to actually go to school, study it. He placed him on special classes and everything. And he would come home, he would sit by the computer. And basically he was working on WordPress. It's all through the time I knew him, he was working on WordPress. And he would create those beautiful designs, he would create fantastic things, and he would show everyone in the house. And I was actually very curious, so I begged him to teach me, and he would never actually have my time. So not really knowing what he was doing or how he got about to doing it, I said I was going to go out on my own and learn it. And basically as a child, I wasn't one of those children who were, I wouldn't say I was a very dedicated child, or I wouldn't say maybe I was one of those very special kids who probably have the whole textbooks crammed on their heads and everything. I never remember to do assignments. I just managed to get past average and all that. So I was just, let's say, basically just a general everyday boy. But I just decided I was going to learn it. And I actually started, I tried to learn it. It didn't work out for me originally because I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know what I was learning. I went through C, I went through PHP, I went through HTML, I don't know, I literally went through everything that was possible for you to go through. And I was just the way I was right before the beginning. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't made anything of myself. And during one of the days, I was actually just online and I was reading and I came across a report that says, talking about Python, talking about how easy it was to learn, and talking about how if you were to put in the right time and dedication, that more than 80% of the people who attempt to learn it actually learned it. And while I wasn't totally average, because I knew I was a little bit better than average, I was actually looking at the numbers and I thought if 80% of the people who try to learn it actually learn it, that is, and we assume that a 50 or a 60 will be the average numbers of people you expect on average, well, that means I also had a chance at learning it. So I decided to start all over again. And just going through, I went online. I decided, okay, what would be the best way to learn? And in the process of going online, I came across a feed and someone said, read the documentation, you learn the documentation. So I picked up the documentation and I sat with it. It was during the Corona period. I had all the time to myself. And so I sat with the documentation during the Corona period. Each day I promised myself by 10 o'clock, between 10 to 10:30, I was going to pick up the documentation. I was going to read some routine, and I did that. Now, during the process of doing that, I came to recognize something, that the whole field when it comes to computer was a practical science. Like, it's probably not going to be what the textbook would define it as or anything. But I quickly learned that the issue we mostly have when we try to learn these things was the fact that we want to cram as much information into ourselves, but we do not give ourselves the opportunity to actually practice the information that we are putting into our brains. And it's like you're trying to be a tailor or you're trying to be a hairdresser. You do not learn just by watching. You do not learn just by reading it somewhere or seeing the styles. You actually have to put your hands into it. You have to do something. You have to make mistakes and make something out of yourself. So I began to do that. I picked it up, going through the documentation. I picked a chapter, I read the chapter, and I decided to experiment the chapter. It was another interesting period of my life because at that point, I had actually lost my system, I had lost my device. So which should have been something to actually put me down and say, oh, I do not have a laptop anymore. I do not have a desktop computer. So there's no way in which I was going to practice this. But I also was online, and while online, I saw an application. It wasn't anything special. In fact, now that I think about it, looking back at the application, it could have been better, but well, and all it did was it just gave the general interface, just an interface where you could write a bit of code and then you can run it, and it runs Python ID on the background. I think it was Python 3.8 or something. And I did that. I'll pick whatever I learned. I'll put it into the ID on my phone. I will test it. It will give me a response. And I'll do that every day. I remember when I was doing that, they were like, I actually had some backlash from my family because they were scared I was getting very obsessed with my phone. There was this, I even had time when they actually seized it for weeks so that I could actually get out of it because they didn't really understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. And truth be told, I myself didn't even understand why I was doing it as much as it was just an interest. It just came up. My brother could do this beautiful thing and he wouldn't teach me. And I really just wanted to do that beautiful thing. And later on in life, I actually came to realize I actually wasn't much of a design person. So I couldn't actually make that beautiful design as much as he could. But I learned a lot from that. And if anybody was ever to come to me and ask me, okay, how do I go about learning? I am a technical person, so I might always give you a technical response. But my response will always be go back to the documentation. Because nowadays, I sit with my colleagues, we all learn Python, right? We all use it for our various day-to-day tax and the rest. And they keep coming back to me and they're like, oh, you are the authority when it comes to this. What do we do? How do we do it? And I realized the only thing that made me different from them was not just the fact that we all learned Python. Yes, we learned Python. Some of us learned it on YouTube. Some of them were very lucky. They actually were able to go into classes with experts who sit and who taught them. I didn't have any of that, but I had a chance to go through the documentation. So I guess all I can actually tell you is that you actually need to learn your basics. You need to understand your basics. And the moment you are done understanding your basics, it's easier to do anything else. Even if it's building LLMs, even if it's just your basic data science, even if you choose you are not going to do anything in data science, you want to be a software developer, even if you choose you want to go into building games, you need your basics. So I guess that's my story, and thank you for the opportunity one last time.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I really appreciate you coming. Yes, Jodie is clapping, and I'm also glad I clapped yesterday when we were discussing. This is just to encourage others that you don't need to have a system before you can start. Like when he told me yesterday that he went through the documentation and he started with the mobile phone. Don't forget, on our group chat, I've been encouraging us to download one or two things on our mobile app, Android and iPhone. The only challenge is that it might not be as big as the screen, but at least you know you are moving on a gradual process until you get something and you know you are learning. So let me give Jodie opportunity to contribute to what Patrick have said before I go to, we have like 5 questions under the Q&A section that I want to read out, but I want you to contribute to that. And before you go, I have Mr. Ganu. I know here, one of my mentees, and that has turned to be a pro. We were together under AI Ibadan platform, and we've been working together. We've done 1 or 2 projects together, and he has been doing amazingly. I will give you time to talk very soon, Mr. Ganu. I know, please be on the line, and you get to talk. So over to you, Jodie, for your contribution.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too long because I do have a tendency to do that, but I just really love your story, Patrick. And I want to say I actually fell in love with Python kind of in a similar way. I was just procrastinating from my thesis, and I was like, well, all these people are talking about Python. So I just sat down and taught myself it from an online course. And then I didn't have anything to use it for ages because I didn't know Python for data science. But it's just, I don't know, one thing maybe I want everyone to walk away from, because this took me so long to understand in my career, is there's enough space in this career for you to do what makes you excited. And I spent a lot of my career trying to do things that impressed people because I felt like that's what I had to do. And it's only kind of the last few years or so that I've actually realized I can do what I like. So I love Patrick's story because it's also about passion. Like you wanted to learn how to build beautiful things. And then you found another thing that you were passionate about. And that's kind of the beauty of tech, right? Like there's just something for everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jodie. I have a question in the Q&A section. It says, good morning, Ma. My name is Joshua. I'm into game development and recently delved into data. My question goes thus: what are the key challenges and opportunities in applying data science to game development?
So this will be another one where I admit I don't have expertise. I have a very slight knowledge about this, but I do know that a lot of game companies, including mobile game companies, who are often a lot smaller and maybe more, have better budgets, they employ data scientists to understand users' interactions with different parts of the system. So it could be, I don't know, you have a game system where you have a certain enemy, and you might find that everyone is dying in this part of the game and then they quit. So you want to understand, is there a way to make it a bit easier so that it's still challenging? Or you need to collect a certain loot in order to progress, but it's too rare. So one of my previous jobs, one of the kind of branches of the company worked with mobile gaming, and I know that some of the data scientists were working on projects like this. So this is the extent of my knowledge of it, I'm afraid. But definitely, especially mobile game companies, there's opportunities to get hired because maybe they don't always have the best business model, but they do have money. So that's also something to think about. Don't be think about the business model of the game company you go into as well, because some of them are a bit dodgy.
Okay. Thank you very much. There's another question for Inioluwa. John Adeshida, I can see your hand. Just give me some time. Good morning, Dr. Jodie. Though you said Miss Jodie, but I'm Inioluwa, a student of Dr. Ladapo. Okay, you are trying to let me know you are online. Don't worry, I've ticked the attendance. Can you please provide advice on creating a roadmap for securing remote data science jobs, particularly for someone based in Nigeria?
So again, I will have to excuse not fully understanding the context in Nigeria. So I will give advice based on Germany and Australia. But if it's not relevant, please feel free to disregard it, or please, someone local, please feel free to jump in and expand on my advice for the local market. But generally, remote jobs, unfortunately, are becoming a little bit rarer just because of the trend. Everything that happens in tech, this took me ages to understand, it follows trends in Silicon Valley. So if Silicon Valley is doing it, we will all eventually do it. So because they've had a bit of a backlash against remote work, these jobs are becoming rarer. But I will say generally, remote jobs are harder to get as a junior. I need to be honest with you about this, because the concern is that you need to be quite independent, and people worry that juniors will not be able to stay focused. They might feel isolated. Like it's harder to feel supported when you work remote. So the beginning of your career, it may not be your first job, but when you move into mid, the way to convince someone that you can work remote, if you do find that remote job, is you need to stress that you are very self-driven, that you're a clear communicator, and you need to establish that trust when you work. When you first start, you need to over-communicate, and you need to be very good with meeting deadlines and things like that. So I'm not really sure that I have a roadmap for you. I would just say it's going to be terribly difficult for the first job. And then obviously, it kind of goes without saying, but you need to be able to have a good internet connection, because you're going to be relying on your own internet to do things like pulling data. Sometimes the data sets can be big. You need to join remote meetings, things like that. So please, at this point, maybe someone from the local market, if you want to jump in and comment, you could give some more Nigeria-specific advice.
Okay, thank you very much, Jodie. From the last part you just mentioned that someone from the local market can come in. I have Mr. Ganiu I know here, who is a business intelligence analyst and is very good in the use of Python and all of that too. So over to you, Mr. Ganiu I know.
Thank you, Dr. Coyote, and thank you, Jodie, for having me here. And as I can see, I don't have technical background in computer science or mathematics. I study business administration in school. And I'm a recent graduate 2022 set, and I got my first ever job remotely in the UK. So on that question, I can relate to it. So the first advice I'm going to give is try to volunteer as much as possible. Create the credibility for users to see. Like, I usually have a roadmap. I post on LinkedIn every Monday. It's not about the likes for me. Just see me there, and when people can comment or I see an expert liking my post, that's the win for the week for me. And do a lot of projects, because when working remotely, you might not know the kind of project you'll be facing or the type of company you'll be working on. Like, I always want to work in e-commerce industry since I studied business administration in school. But unfortunately for me, I dive into working in an industry I don't even understand, never heard of before. They called it built industry, which relates to the human environment, energy. So I dive into more of analyzing energy data. So volunteer a lot, help people on the local WhatsApp group. When somebody raises a question, answer that. And if you have the time to freelance with the local peers, because there are some researchers that might need people to give them a little bit of help. Please don't charge high because you are still learning. You need the credibility. Just be improving. And there are some, they might not have little um, cash to pay. Do it for free. It's for the learning phase. And keep posting on LinkedIn. Kindly ask people that you've worked on to give you recommendation, endorse your skills, and keep posting on LinkedIn because my recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn. So that's my take on that. And on the use of AI, I heard the question about that earlier. Somebody that likes AI, I use Power BI a lot, especially Power Query M, and I receive a lot of emails every day. So AI can assist you. Like over 30% of my tasks every day now, it has automated. More like scanning through requirements every day. It assists in form of that. But in writing code, I believe it has not helped because the requirements keep changing every time and we might need different solutions. So AI can help you based on repetitive tasks. And all these type of copilots, not ChatGPT, that tailored to your M365 accounts, they can help. Like I might have email from a senior colleague and I can ask copilots based on past response, they can reply them. So those kind of situation really helps. So that's my take on that. And I don't want to waste much time. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for having me here. Dr. Kayode.
Thank you very much. Uh, 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 Mr. Gani, I know. Thank you so much.
I think I'll have to come in here. Sorry for the break in transmission. Um, Jodie, it's been a whole lot learning from you and other experts in the house. I think one person was raising his hand. I think Mr. Omorire or so. Please kindly ask your question. Thank you. The person raising the hand earlier, can you please ask your question now, please?
I think maybe that was Mr. Adesida.
Okay, yes, you're right. Thank you. Mr. Adesida, please go ahead with your question.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, Jodie. Very good session you're having. I've learned a bit. I've learned a lot. I can't lie. And to my lecturer, I don't know if it's still on, but basically he made this possible. He made all of us get to learn from this, and we're really grateful to him for that. So I'm a student of Macpherson University, and I'm also currently the project manager for a tech startup. So what they're currently trying to do is they're building a small, not so robust, but a small LLM for the Web3 space. Um, And right now, I think the major issue we are having is data source, because in the Web3 space, it is decentralized. So data, there is a lot of privacy concerns, like user data is, no, we're not getting access to that. So currently we are trying to web scrape, and it's not giving us the results we want. And basically that's what I'm asking here, because we're still trying to do research on how to get Web3 related data, and City Space as a good space to put that in the air. So the experts, various experts in this field, can maybe help us as regards data for the Web3 space, data source for the Web3 space, basically. Thank you very much.
I am afraid I will have to pass on this question in terms of offering any data sources for Web3, because this is something I have absolutely no expertise in, so I don't want to just lie to you and make up an answer. Are there any experts in the chat about Web3 data that might want to jump in instead?
Okay. While we are actually waiting for any Web3 data analyst, or we are into that, we can just signify so that we will get back to you. John Adeshida will get back to you on that. So well noted. You can lower your hand. So I would like to give room to Mr. Ore Babalola to please unmute and ask your question. Thank you very much, Jacob, for standing in, and I'll soon hand over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I want to say I'm very, very happy joining this for the first time. Thank you. Thank you, Jodie. Thank you, Doc. I just want to give a kind of brief background of myself before asking the question. I'm a researcher, and I'm very enthusiastic about learning programs and some other things. Recently, we got a call from in my workplace, a partner company, New Horizons, and they invited us for a course sponsored by the World Bank. So in the course, we were given like three courses to choose from. Engineering, that's hardware, web development, and graphics. So I chose web development. So then I was curious. I was asking them, I need something that will push me very far among these three. And on learning that, I got to know that web development, there are so many aspects that are very, very wide and can make me much more employable in future. So even though I'm good in Excel, I'm good in some of these little programming languages, just starting Python, I want to ask, now I've been seeing adverts from Google, Microsoft, IBM, and what are the necessary skills for me to be employable by this world class? Because I was arguing with those people, I was even arguing with the organizers. The programs they're giving us, hardware engineering, graphics, I don't think all these things that will make you to be global. I don't know. Is data science or data analytics or this one you're presenting, is it an avenue for us to be global, or we still have more to do? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I totally understand the question, and I understand also that feeling before you find your niche, like you like what you're doing, but you're like, I could learn this, I could learn that. And so caveat, I've never worked at one of the really big tech companies. So I can kind of tell you, I have interviewed with AWS and I can tell you what that experience was like. But probably the first thing I want to say is, so 8 years ago when I started, everyone was saying data science, it's the hot career, it was very easy to get a job, blah, blah, blah. We've already talked about the fact the data science market is getting a little saturated. But what people are now looking for, like, I'm not saying if you like data science to abandon it. There are still data science jobs, so please don't feel what I'm saying is scary or anything. But definitely the hot field now, working with data at least, is anything to do with data engineering or like machine learning deployment. And so the reason for this is, as I explained earlier, data scientists are researchers. We don't necessarily build production code. But as data's gotten bigger and as the needs of our field have gotten more complex, we need people who have a lot of expertise in managing the data pipelines, being efficient with that, and also putting these complex models into production. So I would sort of say if you are really like want a job where there's less demand, that's probably going to be valued by these big companies. Again, I can't guarantee that because I haven't worked in one of them. I would say if you want to stay in the data space, these would be the careers I'd advise on. I can't really tell you about the rest of the tech field because I don't work in it. And then in terms of getting into these companies, it's this whole process. It's not like getting into a normal company. I'm sure you probably read about it if you're interested in joining them, but they have these very specific interview formats and you need to actually do preparation for the interviews. But if you're interested in getting into one of these companies, there's plenty of resources. You can read about it. You can practice for the interviews. And obviously they have global workforces. So it's not necessarily that, they only hire from America. They're all over the world. So yeah, that's, I guess, maybe not entirely answering your question, but that's the best answer I can give from my experience.
Okay, thank you very much, Jodie. Mr. Babola, thank you very much. When you are talking about a global practice, you need to start from somewhere. Web development is actually part of a global practice where we know there are so many online tools that can develop websites for you easily now. So it's good you start from somewhere. And this one that we are introducing is into talking about data analytics, data science, visualization, and you can start with Python. After this program, you will join the Python community for you to start using the Humble Data Workshop for a start. Then as time goes on, you now start going into machine learning models. So that is the focus, that is to introduce you, then for you to have a glimpse of what's happening, then you move ahead. I have another question, 3 more questions to go because we have to end this meeting by 10:30. The time is from 9 to 10:30, except if Jodie wants us to extend the meeting, then I'm to leave where I am by 12 o'clock also to travel back to my base. I have this from Udoma, that is one of our master students in Macpherson University. Is asking, how can data scientists utilize blockchain for reliable data audit trails to enhance model accountability? Let me repeat that. How can data scientists use or utilize blockchain for reliable data audit trails to enhance model accountability?
So I think I already revealed my ignorance about Web3 earlier. Okay. So this is unfortunately another one I'm going to have to take a pass on because, again, I don't want to just make up something just so I have an answer. But yeah, this is a super interesting area. I just unfortunately don't have the answers.
Okay, thank you very much. Like we said earlier, we are focusing more on data science and blockchain. Mr. Uzoma, we discuss that later. Any other question on Web3, we'll find a way to organize another webinar on that, how to look into that, and I promise you that. Okay, I have a question from some of my students here. One is saying, is asking what niches in data science and AI that are not yet overly saturated. People have been saying at AI at this part have been saturated, further is saturated. So he's actually asking which area that have not been saturated. That's from King David. I used to call him my king in class.
That's such a nice name. So probably have a two-parter to answer this one. So I'll go back to the answer I just gave about data science versus other jobs. Data science, because it was sort of advertised as super hot, did become, I don't want to say it's overly saturated. There are still jobs. There will always be jobs, and that'll be the second part of my answer. but it is harder. It is harder to get a job as a junior data scientist now. It is easier to get a job as a data engineer. And I always say, like, when someone asks me, like, how many data engineers should you have for a data scientist? If you're in a big company with complex data, you should probably have at least 3 data engineers for every data scientist. So this will give you an idea of the demand, because data engineers are going to be taking care of your sort of business as usual data coming in. It's complex. If you have a really big amount of data coming in, it can be expensive. So this is a job I see still as a growth market. And as I said, like, ML ops is now sort of the hot thing, or LLM ops. It's really just ML ops. This is on the deployment side. So basically managing cloud resources and stuff like that. So it's not data science, it's engineering, but this still allows you to work a bit on the data science AI side. And then ML engineering is also a much, I would say, easier job to get than data scientist at the moment. And again, that's more on the engineering side. Now, let's now not talk about what's hot. Let's talk about business as usual and the jobs that will always be there. One thing I want to say is analytics. Analytics, I think, has weathered this storm pretty well, and they're still just there, you know, being essential to the business. BI analytics is a core job that will never go away. It's still very interesting. You still get to work with data, and it could be a path into companies while you're still working out what you want to do. So maybe you're like, I don't want to be an analyst. Give it a try. It's actually pretty cool. So these sort of like core reporting roles are always going to be there, and they're not super competitive, I would say, although I know we had a BI analyst in the call. Please jump in and contradict me if I'm wrong. And then all sorts of companies that are not tech companies need data scientists to do work that might not be cutting edge and super glamorous, but is still very interesting. So you're not going to have as much competition to do, say, logistics optimization as you are to do cutting edge chatbot development. So just looking for jobs that don't seem as sexy or interesting, but they're going to be good, solid jobs, and they're the best jobs. That's my secret. They're going to have a lot less competition. So I will also just leave space if someone wants to jump in about BI analytics and that as a market.
Thank you very much, Jodie. I have another question here. And Okereke is saying this is my last question. I want to ask, what should we consider as ethics when using personal data in projects?
I want to say it's probably good that I only have 5 minutes to answer this question, because I could probably talk about it for 40. Okay, so when I first came out of my postdoc, so I worked in medical and health sciences. This was like my whole career up to this point. I was shocked at how cavalier people are about the use of personal data. So this area, I think, is complex. You have a lot more control over this question when you are fully operating with models that only consume data from the ecosystem that you are operating within. So it's a very long-winded way to say, if you just have access to your company's data and you're just doing analytics or you're doing machine learning models from scratch, you have more control there. If you're using foundational models like LLMs, this is its whole other ethical minefield. I might not even have time to touch that. But generally, I think the same kind of rules apply as with privacy that I was talking about earlier. You really shouldn't use this data for anything that might expose your users to breaches of privacy. You shouldn't use this data for purposes that it wasn't really collected for. And you should really think about the impact of your models on your end users, like doing the right thing rather than doing the thing that complies with regulations. So I will give just one example about this to kind of round it out, because I don't necessarily have like a black and white answer, right? It's ethics. But my last job, when I was working as a lead data scientist, I worked in programmatic advertising. So basically what this is you see those ads on your mobile apps, they have a whole ecosystem behind them where they're bought and sold. And my company was part of that ecosystem. And when I started this company, Apple was bringing in privacy regulations that meant that the data that comes off applications no longer has a universal ID that ties all of one person's data together. So what this meant that if you want to use that data for, say, targeting advertising, which is its own area of ethically grey, basically you could no longer use all of the data coming off someone's app. So you no longer really had a clear idea, and there was also like restrictions that Apple had about how that data could be used. So what we ended up having to do was build a model that would run within an app on the phone, because this was the only way to protect privacy. And it didn't end up working as an experiment. Like, we couldn't quite get the right data and it didn't work. But this for me was a really good example of, okay, we didn't actually have to be as cautious as we were being with the way that we built this model, but we wanted to because it was the right thing to do. Because what Apple was selling to people was that your privacy will be protected, your personal data will be protected. And we didn't want to try and manipulate the system to get more data just to make that model work, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. So yeah, I suppose my advice would be, think about the spirit of the laws and the regulations rather than the letter, and think about what's going to be best for the end users, because you have potentially very sensitive data in your hands. Like I said, I could talk about that one for 40 minutes, but I managed to wrap it up in 5.
Okay, thank you very much. I can see Okereke thanking you for giving responses to the answers. Okay, please, I want to appreciate every one of us. I want us to understand that the focus of this webinar is to expose all of us to what data science is all about and to encourage us to venture into that. And particularly, we're not particular about a particular programming language, because I know we can use Python. I'm a Pythonist, and I know Jodie is also a Pythonista, but I know some of you might want to venture into R or some other programming language, but we encourage you to use more of Python. At the end of this webinar, there is a Python beginner community that we've set up that you can easily join us. Courtesy Judy and his team, we have onboard data workshop materials that I've been explaining to you and be training you on how to make use of it. I know most of you will be expecting us to have a program like this, but I want to encourage you that anything that has to do with that resource is self-learning. My own is just to guide you and let you guide you in installation. And with that, you can easily do data visualization from beginning to the end, and you can expose you to that. I have a plan. That is the first thing I'll do for my AI class for my students. And in addition to what Omorire will be joining to do in that class too. Okay, this is 10:29. We are about to end the meeting, and I want us to bring out our camera so that we can snap a group picture. I will be able to do it physically. So, okay, somebody is quickly asking, Miss Jodie, will there be any course for beginners? Don't worry, you just throw in your question to me later, then I'll feel free to forward it to Jodie. Is there any course for beginners? We appreciate. Yes, I've said you there are courses for beginner. Onboard data workshop, we have that already. Just private chat me, I'll add you to the group and we start the training together. So it's time for group picture. Quickly, let us put in our cameras so that we can have a group picture. This is more like a physical class. So for us to meet with. So feel free to Oh, I disabled the camera. Chai, that is for my meeting option. Oh, I disabled the camera from the meeting option is actually, and we can't do that again because we started the meeting already. But notwithstanding, we can. Let me still see.
Sir, can you enable the camera?
Yes, I'm trying to see if it can allow you to.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Allow Michael video. Okay. Yes, I've done that. Okay. So you can try that now. Everyone, let's try that. Oh, good. Okay. Let's put on our camera for the video. Yes, it's coming. Oluwole. I can see King David. I can see Zoma. Let's put on our camera. I can see Mayor. I
Hi,
can
Jodie.
see Messi Adebayo. Kehinde Favor, Agedo Adesua, Inioluwa, I can see you are more there. Okay, just put on your camera so that I'll be able to call 1, 2, 3, then we'll take our snapshot. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, hold on. Okay, I have my snapshot. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Judy, for joining. So we continue our conversation and also we'll let you know how to go about that. So bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for
Bye.
all of the questions. They were amazing.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Yeah. Let's go. You saw my face, Abby.